My name is Madison, 33 years old, and my mother publicly disowned me 9 years ago. She remarried, blocked my number, and announced to her wealthy new social circle that I was a dangerous and delusional burden. I never fought back. I simply walked away and built an empire of my own. For almost a decade, I enjoyed absolute silence. Not a single birthday card or holiday text, just the quiet peace of a life completely devoid of her toxic drama. Then, yesterday morning, a frantic knock on my door delivered a heavy priority package from a lawyer I had never heard of. The letter inside demanded I immediately surrender my rights to a mysterious company or face severe legal consequences. They thought they could intimidate the little girl they threw away. Instead, I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, read the legal threats, and laughed until my drink went completely cold. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a family that underestimated your worth and intelligence. I live in a luxury high-rise apartment in downtown Chicago. It is a beautiful space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, and I paid for every single inch of it with my own money. I earned my life through grueling hours and relentless ambition. I work as a financial forensics auditor. My entire career is dedicated to tearing apart fraudulent financial statements, hunting down hidden assets in messy corporate bankruptcies, and exposing white-collar criminals. I am highly paid to find the money that desperate people want to hide. It is an ironic profession, considering I was kicked out of my childhood home with absolutely nothing. When I was 24, my mother Diana decided I was too independent, too stubborn, and too much of a liability to her carefully crafted image. She packed my bags and told me to figure life out on my own. So I did. I built a fortress of stability. Yesterday was supposed to be a regular Tuesday. I was sitting at my kitchen island reviewing a complex offshore tax evasion case for a corporate client when the heavy pounding at my front door startled me. I looked through the peephole and saw a courier holding a thick cardboard envelope. He needed a direct signature. The return address read, Cohen Legal Associates, a high-end law firm located in a very expensive part of the city. I signed for the package, thanked the courier, and walked back to my kitchen counter. The envelope was thick and heavy. I tore the cardboard strip and pulled out a stack of crisp legal documents. The first page was a cover letter printed on expensive linen paper. It was addressed directly to me, written in that aggressive, condescending tone that arrogant lawyers use when they want to bully someone into quick submission. The letter stated that I was the beneficiary of a minor clerical error made 9 years ago. It claimed that a company named Cypress Holdings had accidentally been associated with my name due to a careless mistake by a former accountant. The lawyer, a man named David Cohen, demanded that I immediately sign the attached quitclaim deed to release any and all claims to Cypress Holdings. For those who do not know, a quitclaim deed is a legal instrument used to transfer interest in real estate or corporate entities quickly, usually without any warranties. Basically, they wanted me to sign away my rights without asking any questions about what I was actually giving up. David Cohen gave me exactly 48 hours to sign and return the documents. If I failed to comply, the letter threatened immediate litigation, severe financial penalties, and a prolonged court battle that would ruin my professional reputation. He even had the nerve to include a pre-stamped return envelope as if my absolute compliance was just a minor administrative errand. Most people would have panicked. Most people facing a threat from a high-powered law firm would immediately call an attorney of their own, terrified of being sued by their own family. But David Cohen clearly had no idea what I do for a living. I pushed my client files aside and opened a new secure browser on my laptop. As a financial forensics auditor, I have direct access to corporate registries, tax databases, and business filing networks that the average person never sees. I went straight to the Delaware State Registry. Delaware is the corporate secrecy capital of the country, the exact place wealthy people go when they want to hide their money behind shell companies. I typed Cypress Holdings into the search bar and hit enter. The system spun for a few seconds before generating the official incorporation documents. I scanned the lines of text looking for the supposed clerical error. I scrolled past the registered agent details and the date of formation. The company was formed exactly 9 months after my mother kicked me out of the house. Then I saw it. The managing member information. It was not a typo. It was not a simple accounting mistake. My full legal name was listed as the sole owner and managing member. But that was not the part that made my blood run cold. Beside my name was my actual social security number. My mother had not just made a mistake. She had stolen my identity. Diana had used my personal information to create a shell company behind my back to hide her assets during a messy financial period. I ran a deeper asset search on the company name, pulling up its current financial standing across linked banking institutions. I watched the numbers populate on my screen, blinking in stark black and white. Cypress Holdings was not some empty corporate shell. It was a holding vehicle for a massive investment portfolio. The total liquid assets sitting in the accounts tied to my stolen Social Security number amounted to exactly $4.5 million. My mother had hidden a fortune in my name, and now she was desperately trying to steal it back before I noticed. I did not reply to the arrogant lawyer who sent the package. I closed my laptop, finished my coffee, and got dressed for work. I slid into a tailored navy suit, grabbed my briefcase, and took the elevator down to the parking garage. The drive to my firm in the financial district was quiet. My mind was already categorizing the data, building a mental flowchart of the fraud. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a professional investigation, and Diana had just handed the lead auditor the keys to her entire criminal enterprise. I walked into my Chicago firm and locked the door to my corner office. I bypassed the standard public databases. I logged directly into our firm's proprietary forensic tracing software. This program is designed to untangle complex offshore webs and track wire transfers that people desperately want hidden. I typed Cypress Holdings into the main terminal and connected it to my Social Security number. The software immediately began pulling banking records, tax filings, and property deeds. The large screen filled with data mapping out a reckless financial ecosystem. I spent the next 4 hours doing what I do best. I followed the money. I traced the initial seed funding for Cypress Holdings back to a series of wire transfers made exactly 9 years and 2 months ago. That timeline was not a coincidence. That was the exact month my mother filed for divorce from my father. I watched my mother treat my father like an ATM. When he finally decided to retire and slow down, she realized the endless cash flow was drying up. She filed for divorce, claiming she deserved half of everything he had worked his entire life to build. But during the divorce proceedings, she complained endlessly to anyone who would listen that my father had hidden money from her and left her destitute. The court believed her. My father was forced to liquidate his remaining assets to pay her a massive settlement. Now, looking at the glowing screens in my office, the real story unraveled. My father never hid a single dime. Diana did. In the months leading up to the divorce, she had quietly drained their joint investment accounts. She simply funneled the cash through 3 shell companies to wash the trail. Then she parked the cleaned money into Cypress Holdings. But she had a massive problem. If she put Cypress Holdings in her own name, the divorce lawyers and the judge would find it. She would lose the money and likely face perjury charges. She needed a dummy owner, a ghost. She needed someone whose credit was clean, who was an adult, and who would never have the resources or the knowledge to check their own corporate filings. She chose the 24-year-old daughter she had just kicked out onto the street. She used my name, my date of birth, and my social security number to forge the incorporation documents. By making me the managing member, she insulated herself from the legal fallout. To the IRS and the state of Delaware, Diana had absolutely no connection to the $4.5 million sitting in those accounts. I owned it all. She had committed felony identity theft, tax fraud, and perjury, all while playing the victim. And now, 9 years later, she wanted the money back to fund her lavish new life with her wealthy wife, Catherine. My office phone buzzed, pulling me out of the financial matrix. It was my receptionist. She told me David Cohen was on line 1 with an urgent legal matter. I told her to send it straight to voicemail. I leaned back in my leather chair and watched the red light on my phone blink as he recorded his message. A minute later, the audio file popped up in my email inbox. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and clicked play. David Cohen spoke quickly, clearly used to bullying people intimidated by the word lawyer. Madison, this is David Cohen. I tracked down your workplace because you failed to confirm receipt of the documents I sent this morning. Let me make this very clear. You are currently holding family assets hostage. Your mother has been incredibly generous in not pursuing criminal charges against you for withholding her property. You have until this Friday at 5 in the afternoon to sign the quitclaim deed and return it to my office. If I do not have your signature by then, I will file an injunction, freeze your personal accounts, and drag you into a very public, very expensive lawsuit. Do not test my patience. Sign the paper. I listened to the recording a second time. I analyzed his word choice. He said I was holding family assets hostage. He said my mother was not pursuing criminal charges against me. It was a classic intimidation tactic. He was trying to gaslight me into believing I was the one committing a crime by simply existing on a document they forged. He thought I was a scared, ignorant girl who would panic at the threat of frozen bank accounts. He had absolutely no idea that I held the power to freeze his clients' accounts with a single phone call. I definitely did not call him back. I did not sign the quitclaim deed. Instead, I pressed the print button on my keyboard. The heavy laser printer in the corner of my office hummed to life, spitting out the official state documents for Cypress Holdings. I carried the papers back to my desk and pulled out a bright yellow highlighter. I flipped to the page listing the corporate hierarchy. I uncapped the marker and drew a thick, neon yellow line directly over my own name. Madison, 100% managing member, the sole proprietor. I smiled. The money was legally mine, and I was going to keep it. The morning sun was barely hitting the glass walls of my office when the peace was shattered. I was halfway through a cup of black coffee reviewing the final pages of the Cypress Holdings Incorporation documents when shouting erupted in the outer reception area. My assistant, a usually unflappable woman named Kelly, was pleading with someone to stop. Before I could even reach for my desk phone to call security, my heavy oak office door was shoved open violently. It hit the wall with a loud crack. Standing in the doorway, red-faced and breathing heavily, was my older brother Bradley. He looked exactly like a man who was used to getting his way and was currently furious that a minor obstacle had appeared in his path. Behind him stepped his wife, Simone. Simone was a stunning, incredibly sharp African-American woman who worked as a high-level executive. She was dressed impeccably in a tailored cream pantsuit carrying a designer handbag that probably cost more than my first car. She looked completely out of place next to my brother's unhinged anger, projecting an aura of cold, calculating superiority. Bradley marched right up to my glass desk, slamming his hands flat against the surface. He leaned over, trying to physically intimidate me, just like he used to do when we were teenagers. "Are you completely out of your mind?" he yelled, his voice echoing through the glass walls of my office so loudly that I could see junior accountants peeking out from their cubicles. "David Cohen called Mom last night and told her you ignored his deadline. Who do you think you are, dealing with Madison? You sign those papers right now, or I swear I will ruin you." Kelly appeared in the doorway behind them, her hand hovering over her phone. "Should I call building security?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I did not break eye contact with my brother. I calmly took a sip of my coffee and placed the mug on its coaster. "No, Kelly," I said smoothly. "Give us exactly 5 minutes. Close the door behind you." The door clicked shut. The room fell silent except for Bradley's heavy breathing. I folded my hands on top of my desk and looked at Simone. She was staring at me with a mixture of pity and severe annoyance. She stepped forward gently, pulling Bradley back by his arm, as if he were an unruly child she was trying to manage. "Madison, let us be adults about this," Simone said, her voice dripping with that polished corporate condescension she perfected in the boardroom. "We did not come here to cause a scene. We came here to talk some sense into you. Your mother warned us that you might pull a stunt like this, but I honestly expected better from a professional woman." "A stunt," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Is that what Diana is calling this?" Simone sighed, crossing her arms. "Do not play dumb. We know you are holding up the release of the Cypress Holdings Trust. We know you are refusing to sign the quitclaim deed. I understand that you have lingering resentment toward the family. I know you feel left out because your mother and Catherine are moving forward with their lives, and maybe you are feeling a little delusional and jealous. But you cannot hold our financial future hostage just to settle some childhood vendetta. I leaned back in my chair, genuinely fascinated by the narrative they had been fed. What exactly is your financial future relying on, Simone? I asked, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. She looked at me like I was an idiot. Bradley needs the funds from that trust to expand his venture capital firm, she stated proudly. He is closing a massive acquisition deal this week. On top of that, we are scheduled to close on our new luxury estate in the suburbs on Friday. We need the liquidity from Cypress Holdings to finalize the down payment. You are jeopardizing a multi-million-dollar real estate transaction and my husband's business expansion because you want to throw a tantrum. It is pathetic, Madison. Sign the deed, give the family their money back, and go back to your quiet little life. I looked from Simone to Bradley. Bradley puffed out his chest, looking immensely proud of the false reality he had sold to his intelligent, successful wife. He had convinced Simone that he was a titan of industry, a brilliant venture capitalist who simply needed to unlock a family trust fund to reach the next level of wealth. He had sold her the exact same lie my mother had sold the world. They were all living on a house of cards, and they had just handed me the match. I did not yell. I did not defend myself against the accusations of jealousy. I simply reached across my desk and picked up my iPad. I unlocked the screen and opened the forensic financial dossier I had compiled earlier that morning. You are a very smart woman, Simone, I said quietly, tapping the screen to bring up a specific set of public filings. I have always respected your intelligence, which is why it absolutely baffles me that you never bothered to run a basic credit check on the man you married. Bradley's face instantly went pale. His aggressive posture deflated in a fraction of a second. "Shut up, Madison!" He snapped, his voice suddenly sounding high and panicky. "Simone, do not listen to her. She is lying. Let us just go. We will let the lawyers handle this." He reached for Simone's arm, but she pulled away, her eyes narrowing as she looked at me. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. I slid the iPad across the smooth glass surface of my desk until it rested right in front of her. I tapped the screen one last time, maximizing a document clearly stamped with the seal of the United States Bankruptcy Court. "Your husband does not have a venture capital firm, Simone," I explained, keeping my voice soft but razor sharp. "He has a glorified LLC that has not posted a profit in 4 years. He is not expanding. He is drowning. He is currently $2 million in debt, mostly from toxic margin loans and unpaid vendor invoices. He is facing imminent corporate bankruptcy. The only reason he is desperate for my company's money is to pay off his creditors before the federal authorities start investigating him for wire fraud." Simone stared at the screen. The color drained from her face as her eyes rapidly scanned the undeniable legally binding numbers I had pulled directly from the Federal Registry. She saw the massive debts, the defaulted loans, and the zero balances. The illusion of her wealthy, successful husband shattered in real time right in front of my eyes. I leaned forward, clasping my hands together. "You are not closing on a suburban mansion on Friday, Simone," I told her coldly, "because the man standing next to you could not even secure a loan for a used Honda Civic right now." Simone stared at the iPad. Her perfectly manicured finger hovered over the screen, scrolling through the damning lines of financial ruin. As an executive director of human resources, she dealt with background checks and corporate compliance every single day. She knew exactly what a federal bankruptcy docket looked like. She knew the difference between a temporary cash flow problem and total financial insolvency. For a moment, the polished, confident armor she wore completely cracked. Her eyes darted from the glowing screen to her husband. "Bradley, is this real?" she asked, her voice tight and barely above a whisper. Bradley panicked. The veins in his neck bulged against his expensive silk collar. He aggressively snatched the tablet off the desk and threw it face down. "She is lying, Simone," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "It is a fabricated document. She is a financial hacker. She makes this garbage up for a living to ruin people. It is just an accounting trick to distract us from the fact that she is stealing Mom's money. I rested my chin on my hands and looked directly at my sister-in-law. Federal bankruptcy courts do not play accounting tricks, Bradley, I said smoothly. That document is stamped with a federal seal. If you want, I can pull up the default notices on your corporate credit lines next. Or perhaps we can look at the secondary mortgage you quietly took out on your current home without telling your wife. Simone flinched. The mention of her home struck a raw nerve. But instead of turning her anger fully onto the man who was lying to her face, she defaulted to the instinct of self-preservation. She stood up straighter, smoothing out the front of her cream pantsuit, and snapped her professional mask back into place. She was reeling, but she was far too proud to let me see her family fall apart in the middle of my office. "We will handle our own marital finances," Madison Simone said coldly, though her hands were visibly shaking. "Whatever struggles my husband is facing with his firm do not excuse you from committing theft. You are still legally required to return that trust to your mother. You cannot hide behind spreadsheets to justify your petty revenge." It was a valiant attempt to maintain a united front, but Bradley completely ruined her effort. He slammed both of his hands onto the glass desk again, leaning in so close I could smell the stale mints on his breath. He reached into the inner pocket of his tailored jacket, pulled out the crumpled quitclaim deed he had brought with him, and slammed it down in front of me alongside a heavy gold pen. "Sign the paper, Madison," he demanded, his voice dropping to a vicious growl. "Stop playing these pathetic games. I am not leaving this room until you sign this deed. You sign this right now, or I swear to God I will drag you through the mud so badly you will never work in this city again." I looked at the crumpled paper. Then I looked up at his red, sweaty face. "You are currently trespassing in a secure financial institution," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "I am giving you exactly one chance to pick up your garbage and walk out that door before I have you physically removed." Bradley let out a harsh, mocking laugh. "You are going to call security on your own brother. Do it. Let everyone in this office see exactly what kind of ungrateful, toxic person you really are." I did not hesitate. I reached over to my desk console and pressed the red intercom button. "Kelly," I said clearly, "send up Chief Reynolds and the lobby security team immediately. We have 2 hostile trespassers refusing to vacate my office." Simone grabbed Bradley by the arm, her nails digging into his expensive suit jacket. "Bradley, stop it, we are leaving," she hissed, finally realizing that I was absolutely not bluffing. "You are making a scene and I will not be escorted out of a building like a criminal." It was too late. The heavy oak doors of my office swung open, and 3 large uniformed security guards stepped into the room. Chief Reynolds, a towering man who took his job very seriously, immediately stepped between my desk and my brother. "Sir, I need you to step away from the desk and move toward the elevators right now," Reynolds commanded, his hand resting casually on his utility belt. Bradley raised his hands in mock surrender, his face twisted in a nasty sneer. "Fine, we are leaving. But this is not over, Madison." Simone grabbed her designer handbag, her face flushed with extreme embarrassment. She glared at me one last time. "You are tearing this family apart," she said bitterly. "No, Simone," I replied without blinking. "I am just turning on the lights. You are the ones choosing to stay in the burning house." The security guards escorted them out of my office and marched them down the long glass hallway. I followed a few steps behind simply to ensure they actually got into the elevator. Several of my colleagues were standing by their cubicles, watching the spectacle unfold in stunned silence. Bradley tried to maintain his arrogant stride, but he looked small and desperate, flanked by the large security guards. When they reached the elevator bank, Reynolds pushed the down button. The metal doors chimed and slid open. Simone stepped inside, immediately staring at the floor, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Bradley stopped right at the threshold of the elevator. He turned around to face me. The panic in his eyes was gone, replaced by a dark, vindictive triumph. "You wanted a war, you got one," he spat out. He reached into his leather briefcase, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and threw it as hard as he could. It hit my shoes and slid across the polished marble floor of the lobby. Bradley stepped backward into the elevator. "See you in court," he sneered as the metal doors finally closed, cutting him off from view. Chief Reynolds looked at me, apologizing for the disturbance. I waved him off, assuring him he did his job perfectly. I bent down and picked up the heavy manila envelope. It was sealed with a firm strip of tape. I walked back into my quiet office, locked the door, and tore it open. Inside was a formal civil complaint and a court subpoena. The header clearly displayed the seal of the Cook County Circuit Court. I read the plaintiff line, Diana. I read the defendant line, Madison. I flipped to the charges listed by her arrogant lawyer, David Cohen. Embezzlement, fraudulent conversion of family assets, breach of fiduciary duty. Diana was officially suing me for stealing the $4.5 million held inside Cypress Holdings. She was demanding an immediate injunction to freeze my personal assets and a court order to force the transfer of the company back to her control. I stood alone in my office holding the legal threat that was meant to terrify me into submission, and I smiled. It was a genuine euphoric smile. David Cohen thought he was dropping a nuclear bomb on my life. In reality, he had just handed me the detonator to completely destroy my mother. By officially filing a lawsuit against me for the rights to Cypress Holdings, Diana had just entered the company's existence into the public court record. She had just submitted a sworn legal document demanding ownership of $4.5 million that she had hidden from the family court judge during her divorce 9 years ago. Worse, she had just put on the public record that she owned a massive corporate asset she had never once reported to the Internal Revenue Service. She wanted to use the legal system to bully me, but she forgot that the legal system demands a paper trail, and she had just gift-wrapped her own federal tax evasion case. I sat at my desk with the subpoena laid flat in front of me, tracing the raised seal of the court with my index finger. The sheer arrogance of this legal threat was almost beautiful. My mother and her lawyer thought they had backed me into a corner. They assumed I would take one look at the word embezzlement and immediately beg for a settlement. Instead, they had just handed me the exact leverage I needed. It was time to close the trap. I reached for my office phone. Before dialing, I pressed a specific sequence of buttons on my console to route the call through my firm's secure server. I live and work in Illinois, which is a two-party consent state when it comes to recording conversations. That means you cannot legally record a phone call unless all parties are aware. However, because I handle sensitive financial forensics, my office line has a mandatory automated greeting. When someone connects with me, a mechanical voice clearly states that the line is being recorded and monitored for quality auditing purposes. It is a standard corporate disclaimer. Most people are so used to hearing it when they call a bank or a customer service line that their brains completely filter it out. I dialed the number printed on David Cohen's impressive letterhead. A receptionist answered and quickly transferred me when I stated my name. The automated voice on my end triggered delivering the recording warning in a crisp robotic tone. A second later, the line clicked, and David Cohen picked up. "Ah, Madison," he said, his voice dripping with a sickeningly sweet condescension. "I assume you received the documents your brother dropped off. I was wondering how long it would take for you to come to your senses and call me." I kept my voice soft, hesitant, and carefully modulated to sound slightly overwhelmed. "I received the subpoena, Mr. Cohen. I just do not understand what is happening here. You are accusing me of embezzlement, but I have never transferred a single penny out of Cypress Holdings. How can I be embezzling money I have never even touched?" I could practically hear him smiling through the receiver. He thought he had completely broken me. He thought the heavy legal jargon had intimidated the poor ignorant girl. "Listen to me," Madison Cohen said, slipping into a slow, patronizing rhythm, as if he were explaining a simple concept to a toddler. "Embezzlement does not strictly mean you have moved the funds. In the eyes of the law, you are exercising unlawful dominion and control over a constructive trust that rightfully belongs to your mother. By refusing to sign the quitclaim deed, you are holding family assets hostage. We are fully prepared to argue that your continued possession of the corporate title constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty." I let a few seconds of silence pass, playing the part of a confused civilian, trying to process his impressive legal vocabulary. But I never signed anything I said, allowing a slight tremor into my voice. I never agreed to be a fiduciary. I do not understand how my name got on these documents in the first place. Did my mother set this up? Because I certainly did not open this company. Cohen sighed loudly, clearly annoyed by my apparent lack of financial literacy. Madison let us not play naive. 9 years ago, your mother was going through a highly contentious and complicated divorce with your father. She needed to protect her personal family wealth from an aggressive, equitable distribution process. She set up Cypress Holdings to safeguard those assets. She placed your name on the entity as a placeholder, a nominal member to insulate the funds. She did not need your knowledge or your signature to allocate her own money into an entity designed for your eventual benefit. My heart beat a steady, triumphant rhythm against my ribs. There it was, the golden ticket. Just to be entirely clear, I asked, keeping my tone perfectly innocent. You are saying my mother took my social security number and my legal identity and used them to open a corporate entity without my knowledge or consent, specifically to hide her money from the family court judge 9 years ago. Cohen scoffed, completely missing the massive legal hole he had just thrown his client into. You are deliberately mischaracterizing the situation to make yourself sound like a victim. It was a wealth management strategy. She was protecting her capital. The funds were always hers. The capital contribution was hers. And now that the transition period is over, she is legally reclaiming her estate. It is a standard operational procedure for high net worth individuals. Now you can either sign the quitclaim deed and return the company to her, or we will see you in court where a judge will force you to surrender the assets and likely order you to pay my extensive legal fees. Do we understand each other? I dropped the hesitant, trembling act entirely. My spine straightened, and my voice shifted into the cold, clinical tone I use when I am cross-examining a fraudulent CEO. We understand each other perfectly, Mr. Cohen. I said, every word crisp and razor-sharp. Thank you for clarifying the timeline and confirming my mother's actions on the record. Have a great day. Wait, what do you mean on the record? Cohen started to ask, his smug tone suddenly faltering. I hung up the phone. I did not waste a single second. I accessed the firm's secure server and exported the crystal-clear audio file of our conversation. David Cohen, a licensed attorney, had just explicitly admitted on a recorded line that his client committed federal identity theft, bankruptcy fraud, and perjury. He had proudly confessed that Diana used my social security number without my consent to hide $4.5 million from a judge. And he had done it all while threatening to sue me for the very assets she had stolen my identity to hide. I opened my email client and drafted a new message. The recipient was not my mother, nor was it my brother. It was a man named Arthur Vance. Arthur was the senior partner at a boutique corporate litigation firm in Chicago, a man who specialized in aggressive, high-stakes financial warfare. He was my personal attorney, and he absolutely despised sloppy, arrogant lawyers like David Cohen. I attached the audio file to the email. I attached the PDF of the Delaware Corporate Registry, proving my 100% ownership of Cypress Holdings. Finally, I attached a scanned copy of the ridiculous subpoena Bradley had thrown at my feet. The subject line of my email was simple: confirmed felony identity theft and tax fraud. Ready to proceed. I clicked send, watching the progress bar shoot across the bottom of my screen. The trap was set, the evidence was secured, and my mother's expensive, arrogant lawyer had just handed me the rope they would both hang from. It was time to stop playing defense. It was time to go on the attack. I left my office that evening feeling a profound sense of clarity. The legal machinery was officially in motion thanks to my attorney, but I still had professional obligations to fulfill. Tonight was the annual Winter Charity Gala, hosted by our firm's most lucrative corporate client, a massive logistics conglomerate. The event was taking place in the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, and my attendance was mandatory. In the world of high-level financial forensics, maintaining absolute trust and a pristine public image is just as important as knowing how to read a balance sheet. My boss, the managing partner of our firm, had specifically requested that I attend to schmooze with the executives and secure our auditing contract for the upcoming fiscal year. I went home changed into a floor-length emerald silk gown and took a private car to the hotel. The ballroom was stunning, dripping with crystal chandeliers and overflowing with elaborate white floral arrangements. A string quartet played softly in the corner, while waiters circled the room, carrying silver trays of champagne. I spent the first hour doing exactly what I was paid to do. I mingled, I smiled, and I discussed the changing tax regulations with wealthy board members. Everything was going perfectly. I was standing near the center of the room, engaged in a deep conversation with the chief financial officer of the logistics company, and my boss when I heard it. It was a sharp, trembling gasp, followed immediately by my name being called out in a shrill, desperate tone. Madison. Oh my God, Madison, please. I turned around and felt the blood freeze in my veins. Pushing through the crowd of elegantly dressed donors was my mother, Diana. She was wearing a dramatic, heavily beaded silver gown that caught the light with every frantic step she took. Right behind her was Catherine, her wealthy new wife, looking stern and deeply concerned. I realized instantly how they had gotten in. Catherine was a prominent socialite in the city. Buying a $10,000 table at a charity event just to ambush me was absolute pocket change to her. Diana did not walk up to me quietly. She practically threw herself into my personal space, grabbing my forearms with a desperate, clawing grip. "Please, you have to stop this," she cried loudly, her voice echoing over the soft music and the low hum of conversation. People immediately stopped talking and turned to stare at us. "You are destroying our family, Madison. You cannot do this to me." I stepped back firmly, breaking her grip on my arms. "Keep your voice down, Diana," I said coldly. "You are making a scene at a private corporate event." But she did not want to keep her voice down. The scene was the entire point of her strategy. She knew that in my industry, a hint of instability or financial impropriety could end a career overnight. She was trying to publicly nuke my professional reputation to blackmail me into signing away the $4.5 million. Diana brought her hands up to her face, producing actual tears as she let out a loud theatrical sob. "I will not keep quiet while you steal my life savings," she wailed, ensuring that my boss and the chief financial officer heard every single word. "You are sick, Madison. You are having a severe mental breakdown and you need help. You cannot just steal your own mother's retirement fund because you are having a psychological crisis." The silence around us was deafening. The wealthy elite of Chicago loved nothing more than a scandal, and my mother was feeding them a 5-course meal. My boss stepped forward, his face a mask of extreme professional concern. He looked at Diana, then at me. "Excuse me, madam," he said, trying to diffuse the tension. "This is a private corporate function. Perhaps this conversation should be taken outside." Diana immediately latched onto him, recognizing his authority. "Are you her employer?" she asked, her voice trembling with perfectly manufactured grief. "Oh, thank goodness! You have to understand my daughter is not well. She has completely lost her grip on reality. She has frozen my bank accounts and is claiming my entire retirement portfolio belongs to her. She is holding my money hostage. Please, you cannot let her manage your client's money when she is actively embezzling from her own family. She needs psychiatric intervention, not a corporate accounting job." Catherine stepped up beside Diana, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder and looking at my boss with solemn gravity. "It is true," Catherine added smoothly. "We have tried to handle this privately, but her delusions are spiraling out of control. We are just terrified of what she might do next." I stood perfectly still, watching them execute their coordinated attack. It was brilliant in a deeply sociopathic way. They were using my exact area of expertise against me. As a financial auditor, if my own family publicly accused me of embezzlement and mental instability, my boss would have no choice but to suspend me pending an investigation. Diana thought that the threat of losing my high-paying job, my pristine reputation, and my prestigious career would break me. She thought I would drag her into the hallway, beg her to stop, and promise to sign the quitclaim deed just to make the nightmare end. My boss looked at me, his eyes wide with alarm. "Madison," he said quietly, his tone shifting from friendly to rigidly corporate. "Is there a situation here that we need to address privately? Do we need to call security to escort your family out, or is there truth to this dispute? The chief financial officer of the logistics firm, a man who trusted me with millions of dollars of corporate data, took a noticeable step back from me. Diana looked at me through her fake tears. Beneath the weeping, victimized expression, her eyes were cold and triumphant. She was waiting for me to surrender. I did not panic. I did not raise my voice, and I certainly did not cry. I looked my boss directly in the eyes and offered him a calm, reassuring smile. "There is absolutely no need to worry," I said evenly. "My mother is simply confused about the legal definition of ownership. Please excuse me for just one moment." Instead of running out of the room in shame, I turned my back on my mother and walked purposefully toward the front of the grand ballroom. I walked past the shocked guests, past the string quartet, and directly up to the raised podium. I reached out and took hold of the microphone that was intended for the silent auction announcements. I tapped the heavy metal mesh of the microphone, sending a sharp, echoing thud across the completely silent ballroom. My boss stared at me. The chief financial officer held his breath. I opened my mouth to speak, prepared to end the charade right there. But before a single syllable could leave my lips, a hand clamped down on my forearm with bruising force. It was Catherine. The elegant weeping facade she had just displayed for the crowd vanished instantly. Her grip was like a steel vise, her fingernails digging through the silk of my gown. "Let us take a walk, Madison," she hissed under her breath, her voice low and venomous. I could have pulled away. I could have spoken into the microphone and humiliated them both. But the sheer panic radiating from Catherine piqued my professional curiosity. As a forensic auditor, I know that when a fraudster panics, they talk. And when they talk, they hand you leverage. So I let go of the microphone. I offered the stunned audience a polite, reassuring nod and allowed Catherine to swiftly guide me down the side steps of the stage. She marched me through a set of heavy velvet curtains and pushed open a solid mahogany door, shoving me into a secluded VIP hallway. The thick door swung shut behind us, instantly cutting off the ambient noise of the gala. The hallway was empty, lined with expensive modern art and plush carpet. We were completely alone. Catherine spun around to face me, dropping the last remaining shred of her polite society mask. Her eyes were furious, cold, and entirely calculating. "You listen to me very carefully," Catherine began, pointing a manicured finger inches from my face. "I do not care what kind of petty, unresolved childhood trauma you have with your mother. I do not care about your little temper tantrums. But you will not stand in the middle of a high-profile charity event and try to ruin the life I am building. You are going to sign that quitclaim deed tonight, or I will personally make sure you never work in the financial sector again." I leaned my shoulder against the wall, crossing my arms. "You are threatening my career, Catherine," I asked, keeping my voice completely level. "I am not threatening you. I am promising you," she sneered, pacing back and forth in the narrow corridor. "Do you know who I am? I sit on the board of directors for 3 major hospitals in this city. I play tennis every Tuesday with the wife of the logistics CEO. You were just begging for a contract. I have the social capital to crush you with a single phone call. I can walk right back into that ballroom, take your boss aside, and tell him that you are actively extorting your family. I will tell him you are a liability. I will have you fired, blacklisted, and buried under so much bad press you will not even be able to get a job managing a fast food register." She stopped pacing and stood in front of me, crossing her arms to mirror my posture. She thought she looked intimidating, but all I saw was a woman who was deeply, tragically ignorant of the financial reality she was currently living in. "You are throwing away your entire future over pure jealousy," Catherine continued, her tone shifting from aggressive to boastful. "You are doing this because you cannot stand the fact that Diana has moved on and found happiness. You cannot stand that we are successful. Just last week, your mother and I closed on a brand new $2 million estate in the North Shore. We are building a beautiful, peaceful life together in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the state. We have architectural plans, we have a massive property, and we have wealth you could only dream of." She took a step closer, lowering her voice to a dramatic whisper. "That money belongs to Diana. She earned it. She survived a terrible marriage to your father, and she deserves to enjoy her retirement. I will not let a bitter, estranged daughter hold our future hostage. So you are going to go home, you are going to sign that document, and you are going to disappear back into your sad, lonely little life. Do we understand each other? I let her words hang in the silent hallway. I watched her breathe heavily, fueled by her own arrogant monologue. She truly believed she was the apex predator in this dynamic. She truly believed she was defending her wife from a greedy child. In my line of work, the most dangerous people are never the ones who are actively lying. The most dangerous people are the ones who completely believe the lies they have been told. Catherine was not the mastermind. Catherine was the mark. Diana had sold her the exact same fairy tale she had sold my brother Bradley, a fairy tale of endless wealth and grand estates. I uncrossed my arms and slowly pushed myself off the wall. I smoothed down the front of my emerald silk gown, taking my time, letting the silence stretch until Catherine began to look slightly unnerved. "You are very protective of your wife," I said quietly. "That is admirable. It really is. But before you call my boss and try to end my career, I have a very simple question for you regarding this beautiful new life you are building." Catherine narrowed her eyes, sensing a shift in the atmosphere but unable to pinpoint exactly what it was. "What question?" she demanded defensively. I tilted my head, studying her face. "Did you actually read the title of your new estate?" I asked, my voice dropping to a soft clinical register. "Did you look at the mortgage guarantee documents when you and Diana sat at the closing table last week?" Catherine scoffed, though a flicker of uncertainty flashed in her eyes. "Of course I did. We bought it together. It is fully financed. What does that have to do with anything?" "It has everything to do with this," I replied, stepping directly into her personal space. "Because Diana did not use her own money to buy that house, Catherine. She does not have any money. She used a high-risk bridge loan to secure that $2 million property. And do you know what she used as collateral to guarantee that loan?" Catherine stared at me. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The aggressive socialite persona was rapidly dissolving, replaced by the creeping dread of a woman who was suddenly realizing she was standing on a trap door. "She collateralized the loan using Cypress Holdings," I whispered, delivering the final devastating blow. "She guaranteed your beautiful new mansion, using the company that is legally registered under my social security number. She used my company, which means, Catherine, I do not just own her retirement fund, I own your house." I did not wait for Catherine to respond. I left her standing in that quiet VIP hallway, her face pale and her mouth slightly open, completely paralyzed by the financial reality I had just dropped on her. I pushed through the heavy mahogany door and stepped back into the glittering chaos of the grand ballroom. I spotted my boss and the chief financial officer standing exactly where I had left them. They looked deeply uncomfortable, casting nervous glances toward the stage, where Diana was still dabbing her dry eyes with a silk tissue, waiting for me to run back in and surrender. I walked straight up to the CFO, projecting an aura of absolute unshakable calm. I did not apologize for my mother, and I did not offer a hysterical defense. Instead, I reached into my designer clutch and pulled out a neatly folded copy of the subpoena Bradley had thrown at me earlier that day. I handed it directly to the CFO. "Please excuse the theatrical interruption," I said, keeping my voice low, steady, and strictly professional. "My mother is currently attempting to extort me because I recently uncovered a multi-million-dollar tax fraud scheme she orchestrated using my stolen identity. She filed this frivolous lawsuit to intimidate me into silence." The CFO unfolded the paper. As a numbers man who dealt with corporate litigation regularly, he immediately understood the gravity of a federal identity theft implication versus a hysterical mother crying about a retirement fund. His eyes scanned the ridiculous charges of embezzlement drafted by David Cohen. "I have already retained Arthur Vance as my legal counsel." I continued smoothly, making sure my boss heard the name clearly. "The matter is being handled swiftly through the proper federal and civil channels. I apologize that she brought this domestic issue to a corporate event, but I assure you, my professional integrity remains entirely uncompromised." My boss visibly relaxed. Arthur Vance was a legend in the Chicago corporate law sector. You do not hire a shark like Arthur Vance if you are having a mental breakdown. You hire him when you have irrefutable proof and you are preparing to destroy someone in federal court. The CFO handed the subpoena back to me and offered a tight, respectful smile. Family disputes involving wealth are always unfortunate, Madison, the CFO said quietly, slipping his hands into his tuxedo pockets. But it sounds like you have everything under perfect control. We look forward to reviewing your firm's audit proposal on Monday morning. It was a complete professional victory. I had secured the client and completely neutralized my mother's attack in less than 3 minutes. Seeing me talking calmly with the executives, Diana realized her public humiliation tactic was failing miserably. She descended from the stage, her silver beaded gown sparkling under the chandeliers, and marched toward our group. She was gearing up to raise her voice again, ready to launch into another weeping monologue about her ungrateful daughter. But the atmosphere in the ballroom had fundamentally shifted. The wealthy elite of Chicago are incredibly perceptive when it comes to power dynamics and authentic behavior. They watched me stand there in my emerald gown, holding my champagne glass with a steady hand, discussing legal strategy with the top executives of a logistics empire. Then they looked at Diana. They saw her red, blotchy face, her desperate posturing, and her shrill attempts to command attention. The contrast was absolutely damning. Whispers started rippling through the surrounding tables, but they were no longer directed at me. They were directed at Diana. As she approached, people subtly turned their backs on her, forming a polite but impenetrable social wall of tailored suits and expensive dresses. The city's elite recognized a liability when they saw one. Nobody wanted to be associated with a woman throwing a tantrum at a charity event. Diana stopped in her tracks, suddenly realizing that her audience had completely turned against her. She looked around the room, panicking as the cold, judging eyes of her wealthy peers silently condemned her behavior. I turned to leave the event, having accomplished exactly what I came to do. I walked gracefully past my mother without giving her a single glance. As I made my way through the grand lobby toward the coat check, I saw my brother Bradley pushing his way through the revolving glass doors of the hotel entrance. He must have received a frantic text message from Catherine. He looked completely out of place, wearing a wrinkled business suit and sweating profusely among the tuxedoed guests leaving the gala. He spotted me and immediately stormed over, his face twisted in a familiar mask of arrogant rage. He reached out and grabbed my arm, trying to physically stop me. I easily twisted out of his grip, stepping past him into the cool night air just outside the hotel entrance. "What the hell did you just say to Catherine?" Bradley hissed, looking nervously over his shoulder to make sure the hotel security guards were not watching him. "She just called me hyperventilating in a hallway. You need to stop this right now, Madison. You are going to sign the deed, or I am going to make sure you regret ever being born." I signaled the valet to bring my private town car around. I buttoned my coat against the chill of the Chicago wind and turned to face my brother. I did not yell. I did not insult him. I just stepped close enough so that only he could hear me over the sound of the city traffic. "You have exactly 48 hours, Bradley," I whispered, my voice completely devoid of any familial warmth. He blinked, trying to maintain his tough facade. 48 hours for what he demanded. 48 hours before the bank calls in your toxic margin loans, I said, watching the color drain from his face. 48 hours before Simone completely realizes the extent of the wire fraud you have been hiding from her. 48 hours before your entire fake life completely collapses into dust. I suggest you spend that time packing your bags. My town car pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out and opened the door for me. I climbed into the leather back seat, leaving my brother standing frozen on the sidewalk. As the car pulled away, I looked out the tinted window. Bradley was staring after me with a look of pure, unadulterated terror. The countdown had officially begun. I woke up the next morning feeling more rested than I had in a decade. I took my time getting ready, carefully choosing a sharp charcoal blazer and a crisp white blouse. I packed my leather briefcase with surgical precision. Inside went my state-issued identification card, my original Social Security card, the physical printed copies of the Delaware Corporate Registry, and the formal letter of representation from my legal counsel. I was not going to a family reunion. I was executing a hostile corporate takeover of my own stolen identity. At exactly 8:45, I pulled my car into the VIP parking garage of the flagship Chase Bank branch in the heart of the downtown financial district. I walked into the massive marble lobby right as the heavy glass doors unlocked at 9 o'clock. The bank was practically empty, echoing with the soft classical music playing from the hidden ceiling speakers. I bypassed the standard teller lines entirely. I approached the main reception desk and asked to speak directly with the senior director of commercial banking. The young associate tried to direct me to the customer service queue, but I placed my business card on the polished granite counter. When he saw my title as a financial forensics auditor, his demeanor shifted instantly. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a spacious glass-walled office across from the senior branch manager, a meticulous man named Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis offered me a cup of premium coffee, which I politely declined. I opened my briefcase and laid my official documents flat on his polished mahogany desk. I am the sole owner and managing member of Cypress Holdings. I told him, keeping my voice perfectly level and strictly professional. I need to conduct a comprehensive security review of my corporate accounts effective immediately. Mr. Davis smiled professionally and typed the company name into his terminal. He asked for my identification and my social security number to verify my profile. I handed him the physical cards. He scanned them into his secure system. I watched his eyes track back and forth across his computer screen. The polite customer service smile slowly melted off his face, replaced by a look of deep professional concern. Ms. Madison, he started, clearing his throat nervously. The system verifies that you are indeed the sole proprietor and the only registered managing member of Cypress Holdings. You hold complete signatory authority. However, I am seeing a highly irregular pattern of activity here. There are two secondary users who have been issued premium corporate credit cards and given wire transfer authority. A Diana and a Bradley. I do not see any authorization forms bearing your signature for these secondary users. I leaned back in my chair and looked him dead in the eye. That is because I never authorized them, Mr. Davis. My identity was severely compromised 9 years ago. Those individuals have been operating those accounts without my legal consent. I am officially reporting unauthorized access on a federal commercial account holding $4.5 million. The color completely drained from the bank manager's face. In the banking world, allowing unauthorized users to siphon millions of dollars from a corporate account is a catastrophic liability issue. It is the exact kind of massive oversight that ends careers and invites severe federal fines from banking regulators. He immediately began typing furiously on his keyboard, his posture suddenly rigid with panic. "What would you like me to do?" he asked, his voice tight with sudden urgency. "I want a total administrative freeze on every single account tied to Cypress Holdings," I instructed calmly. "I want all outbound wire transfers blocked. I want every single corporate credit card associated with this company deactivated immediately. I want all online banking access revoked and the login credentials reset. Nobody moves a single penny out of this institution without my physical presence and my ink signature." Mr. Davis did not argue. He did not ask me to wait while he consulted the legal department. When a verified account owner reports massive identity fraud on this scale, the bank is legally obligated to protect the assets instantly. I sat in silence and listened to the rapid clicking of his mouse. With every single click, another door slammed shut on my mother's lavish lifestyle. With every keystroke, my brother's fake venture capital empire crumbled a little more. "It is done," Mr. Davis finally said, turning his monitor slightly so I could see the glaring red banners displayed across the Cypress Holdings financial dashboard. "The accounts are entirely frozen. The secondary cards will decline immediately if anyone attempts to swipe them." I thanked Mr. Davis for his prompt assistance, requested a physical printout of the freeze confirmation for my legal records, and placed the paperwork neatly back into my briefcase. I walked out of the bank with the exact same calm, measured pace I had used when I walked in. I did not feel guilty. I did not feel vindictive. I just felt an overwhelming sense of justice finally being served. I walked back to the parking garage and got into my car. I did not start the engine right away. I placed my briefcase on the passenger seat and took my phone out of my purse. I placed it in the center console, resting my hands on the steering wheel. My mother and my brother lived on a strict diet of other people's money. It was only a matter of time before they tried to feed. I sat in the quiet solitude of my car and waited. I watched the digital clock on the dashboard slowly change. 10 o'clock passed. 11 o'clock passed. I watched the minutes tick by, anticipating the exact moment the grand illusion would shatter. At exactly 11:14 in the morning, my phone screen lit up. A text message banner flashed across the top. It was from Bradley. The message was just 3 question marks. 5 seconds later, a second message appeared. Why is the corporate card declining? 10 seconds after that, the phone began to violently vibrate against the plastic console. It was a barrage of incoming texts. Call me right now. Did you do something to the accounts? Madison, answer your phone. I am at the dealership. I am going to call the police. The texts came in so fast they overlapped each other. He was spiraling. He was standing in public trying to spend money he did not own, and the plastic in his hand had just turned entirely worthless. I picked up the phone, swiped away the notifications, and put the device on silent. I did not need to be physically present at the dealership to know exactly what was happening to my brother. I could picture the entire scene playing out with absolute crystal clarity. Bradley was sitting inside a pristine, brightly lit Porsche dealership in the wealthy suburbs. He was likely lounging in a leather chair across from a high-end sales manager wearing his expensive tailored suit, projecting the image of a titan of industry. He was there to lease a brand new Porsche 911, a completely reckless impulse purchase designed to soothe his bruised ego after his humiliating exit from my office the day before. He wanted to drive that car to his country club, toss the heavy key fob to the valet, and pretend he was a self-made millionaire. When the time came to process the massive down payment, Bradley casually pulled out the heavy metal corporate card issued under Cypress Holdings. He handed it over with a smug smile, expecting the transaction to slide through flawlessly, just like it had for the past 9 years. The salesman took the card, typed the numbers into his terminal, and waited. I knew exactly what the computer screen flashed back at him. Transaction declined. Account frozen. Contact the primary cardholder immediately. The salesman probably offered an apologetic smile, suggesting it was a simple fraud alert on such a large purchase, and asked to run it again. And when it declined a second time, the illusion shattered. Bradley was left sitting there completely exposed, unable to afford the luxury lifestyle he so aggressively paraded in front of everyone. My phone lit up again, breaking through my thoughts. It was an incoming call from Bradley. I watched his name flash on the screen for a few seconds. I decided to indulge him. I reached out, pressed the green button, and brought the phone to my ear. I did not say hello, I just listened. "What the hell did you just do?" Bradley screamed into the receiver. His voice was completely frantic, echoing slightly, which meant he had stormed out of the showroom and was pacing in the dealership parking lot. The bank manager just told the salesman that the primary owner placed a hard freeze on the account. "You call Chase Bank right now and you tell them to unlock my money, Madison. You are going to ruin my credit and humiliate me in front of the entire dealership. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" I rested my head against the leather seat of my car. "Actually, Bradley," I said smoothly, keeping my voice low and completely devoid of sympathy, "I think it is incredibly generous of me to only freeze the accounts. Since I am the sole legal owner of Cypress Holdings, every time you swipe that card, you are technically committing corporate wire fraud. If I wanted to humiliate you, I would have called the police and had them arrest you right there on the showroom floor for using a stolen financial instrument. So I highly suggest you lower your voice, walk out of that dealership, and take an Uber home." "You are a psycho!" he yelled, his panic mutating into pure rage. "You think you are so smart? You think you can just steal our money and ruin my life? I am calling David Cohen. I am calling Mom. We are going to drag you into federal court, and we are going to destroy you. You are going to be living on the street by the time we are done with you. You cannot afford David Cohen anymore, Bradley, I replied coldly. His retainer comes out of the account. I just froze. Have a wonderful afternoon. I pulled the phone away from my ear, pressed the red button to end the call, and tossed the device back into the cup holder. I started the engine of my car and merged smoothly into the downtown traffic. While Bradley was melting down in a suburban parking lot, an entirely different disaster was unfolding in his own home. Simone was sitting in her pristine corner office at the corporate human resources firm where she worked as an executive director. She was a woman who prided herself on control order and absolute financial stability. But my words from the day before had planted a seed of doubt that she simply could not ignore. I had told her that her husband was drowning in debt, that his venture capital firm was a sham, and that they were not closing on their new luxury estate on Friday. She had spent the entire morning trying to push my warning out of her mind, telling herself I was just a bitter, estranged sister trying to cause trouble. But the doubt gnawed at her. During her lunch break, Simone finally logged into the secure portal for their joint personal bank accounts. She bypassed the standard checking account they used for daily expenses and clicked into their high-yield savings and the home equity line of credit they had taken out against their current house. She expected to see the hundreds of thousands of dollars they had carefully saved for the down payment on the new estate. Instead, her eyes landed on a glaring red number. Their savings account was completely empty. Their checking account was overdrawn by several $1,000s, and the home equity line was maxed out to its absolute limit. Simone felt the air leave her lungs. She clicked into the transaction history, her heart pounding against her ribs. Page after page of massive wire transfers filled the screen. Bradley had been systematically draining their joint accounts for the past 6 months. He had been moving their personal savings into the corporate account of his failing LLC just to cover massive margin calls and pay off aggressive creditors. He had literally stolen his wife's hard-earned money to keep his fake empire afloat, and he had hidden the bank statements to cover his tracks. Everything I had said in my office was the absolute truth. Bradley was not a successful venture capitalist. He was a desperate fraud who had just driven their family into total financial ruin. Simone stared at the screen, tears of pure, blinding anger pricking the corners of her eyes. She realized that while she was busy defending him to me, he was actively destroying their future behind her back. She did not call him. She knew if she called him, he would lie, manipulate, and gaslight her into believing it was just a temporary cash flow issue. She needed the truth. And she knew there was only one person who had the forensic data to show her exactly how bad the situation really was. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat as I parked my car in the garage of my apartment building. I looked down at the screen. It was a text message from a number I had not saved, but I immediately knew who it was. The message was short, devoid of any professional pleasantries, and completely desperate. "We need to talk, without Bradley. Today." I typed back a quick reply to the desperate message on my screen. I gave her the address of a quiet, independent coffee shop tucked away in a neighborhood exactly halfway between my downtown office and her affluent suburb. I told her to meet me there in 1 hour. I left my briefcase in the car, went upstairs to my apartment to grab a fresh set of printed financial dossiers, and headed right back out. When I walked into the dimly lit cafe, I spotted Simone immediately. She was sitting at a small wooden table in the far corner, facing the front door. The contrast between the woman who had stormed into my office yesterday and the woman sitting in front of me now was genuinely shocking. Yesterday, Simone was wearing a tailored cream pantsuit projecting an aura of absolute superiority. Today she was wearing an oversized cashmere sweater, her hair was pulled back into a messy knot, and her designer handbag was shoved carelessly under her chair. She looked pale, exhausted, and utterly terrified. She was clutching a paper cup of herbal tea with both hands, staring blankly at the tabletop. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. I did not order anything. I placed my thick leather folder flat on the table between us. Simone looked up at me. Her eyes were red, indicating she had likely been crying in her car before walking inside. I checked our accounts. Simone said, her voice completely hollow and devoid of its usual corporate polish. "The savings are gone. The checking is overdrawn. He drained everything. You were right, Madison. You were right about all of it. I did not smile. There is absolutely no joy in watching a smart, capable woman realize she has tied her life to a financial parasite. I opened my leather folder and pulled out the forensic paper trail I had compiled from the public registries. What you saw in your personal banking portal is only the surface, Simone. I told her gently, but firmly. Bradley is not just broke. Being broke is not a crime. What Bradley has been doing to cover up the fact that he is broke is a massive federal offense. I slid a set of highlighted bank statements across the table. I pointed to a specific series of outbound transfers. For the past 6 months, Bradley has been engaging in systemic wire fraud, I explained. He has been taking funds from your joint personal accounts and wiring them directly into his corporate LLC. Then he has been using that commingled money to pay off aggressive private creditors and cover massive margin calls on toxic investments. He is intentionally blurring the lines between personal and corporate assets to hide his total insolvency from his investors. Simone stared at the numbers. Her hands started to tremble so badly she had to put her tea down. I am the primary breadwinner, she whispered in horror. My salary funds those joint accounts. I am an executive director of human resources. My entire career is based on compliance and ethics. If the federal authorities look at this, they are going to see my money being funneled into a fraudulent venture capital firm. They will think I am an accomplice. They will think I helped him launder the cash. It gets significantly worse, I said softly. I turned the page in the folder. I pulled out a thick legal document stamped by the county recorder of deeds. It was the official paperwork for a secondary home equity line of credit. You mentioned yesterday that you two were supposed to close on a new luxury estate this Friday, I continued. But to secure the earnest money for that new house, Bradley needed liquid cash he simply did not have. So 3 weeks ago, he took out a maximum capacity secondary mortgage on the home you currently live in. Simone gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. No, she choked out, shaking her head aggressively. No, he could not do that. The house is in both of our names. The bank would require my physical signature and my direct consent to approve a secondary lien on the property. I never signed anything. I slid the final page of the loan agreement across the wooden table. I tapped my index finger right on the bottom line. Take a look at the signature, Simone. She looked down. Staring back at her was her own signature executed in blue ink. But it was slightly rigid, lacking the fluid, confident motion of her natural handwriting. It was a painstaking forgery. Bradley had copied his wife's signature to illegally borrow hundreds of thousands of dollars against their shared home. He forged your name, I stated, letting the brutal reality of the crime hang in the air between us. He committed mortgage fraud. He essentially stole the equity out of your home and pledged it to a bank without your knowledge. When his LLC officially collapses, which will happen by the end of this week, the creditors will pierce the corporate veil. They will come after your personal assets. They will foreclose on your house, and because your name is on this forged document, your perfect credit score and your professional background check will be completely obliterated. Simone finally broke. The stoic, proud exterior vanished entirely. She covered her face with her hands and began to sob quietly, her shoulders shaking with the crushing weight of her husband's betrayal. I sat quietly, letting her process the sheer magnitude of the disaster. After a few agonizing moments, she lowered her hands. She looked down at her lap and gently rested her palms over her stomach. I am 3 months pregnant, Madison. She whispered, her voice cracking with raw devastation. We have not even told the family yet. I am carrying his child. I cannot go to federal prison. I cannot lose my corporate license or my job. I need my health insurance. If my credit is destroyed and the house is foreclosed on, I will have absolutely nothing to give this baby. The revelation shifted the entire dynamic of the situation. Bradley was not just ruining his own life. He was actively destroying the future of an unborn child. My resolve, which was already absolute, hardened into solid steel. I reached across the table and placed my hand firmly over hers. You are not going to federal prison, Simone, I said, making sure she looked me directly in the eyes. I am a financial forensics auditor, and my personal lawyer is the most ruthless corporate litigator in Chicago. We know exactly how to untangle a victim from a white-collar crime scene. I can quarantine your credit profile. I can prove to the authorities that your signature was forged and that you had zero knowledge of the wire fraud. I can legally isolate you from his impending bankruptcy so that you and your baby walk away from this completely unscathed. Simone gripped my hand like a lifeline, her knuckles turning white. Please, she begged, tears spilling down her cheeks. Tell me what I have to do. I will do anything. I leaned back and looked at her with pure professional calculation. I need leverage, I said coldly. Tomorrow morning, my mother is hosting an emergency family meeting at her mansion to try and force me to hand over the Cypress Holdings money. Bradley will be there completely desperate and looking for a bailout. I need you to go home tonight and pack a bag. I need you to take every single financial document, every hard drive, and every laptop in Bradley's home office. You are going to hand them directly to my lawyer. And when the time comes, you are going to testify against him and this family in federal court. Simone did not even hesitate. She wiped the tears from her face, her expression transforming from profound terror into a fierce, unstoppable maternal determination. I will give you everything you need, she promised, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. I am done protecting him. I left the quiet coffee shop after giving Simone the direct contact information for my lead attorney. I instructed her to wait until Bradley was deeply asleep that night. Once he was unconscious, she was to take a secure flash drive and back up his entire computer system. I told her to copy his encrypted email folders, his fraudulent tax returns, and the digital copies of the forged mortgage documents. She nodded, her resolve completely solidified by the terrifying reality of her situation. I paid for our drinks, stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, and headed back to my downtown office. The dominoes were falling significantly faster than I had originally anticipated. My brother was melting down at a luxury car dealership. His wife was actively preparing to testify against him in federal court, and my mother was entirely oblivious to the fact that her empire was crumbling. But there was still one loose end that needed to be addressed. By the time I reached my desk and booted up my computer, I had an automated security notification waiting for me in my secure banking portal. I clicked on the flashing icon and opened the daily transaction log for Cypress Holdings. The system had flagged 3 consecutive declined transactions. They were attempted corporate wire transfers routed directly to Cohen Legal Associates. David Cohen had tried to process his massive legal retainers for the civil lawsuit he had filed against me that morning. The hard administrative freeze I had placed on the account at Chase Bank had blocked every single penny from moving. I leaned back in my chair and smiled, visualizing exactly how the last 2 hours must have played out in David Cohen's expensive law office. I knew exactly how arrogant attorneys reacted when their cash flow suddenly stopped. When a massive retainer bounces, they do not politely ask their client for a new credit card. They immediately start digging to protect their own financial interests. Cohen would have immediately called the bank to demand an explanation, assuming it was a simple fraud alert. The commercial bank manager would have informed him that the primary account holder had enacted a hard freeze. Confused and angry, Cohen would have bypassed my mother entirely and pulled the corporate filings himself to see why I had the authority to lock the funds. And the moment he actually read the fine print of the Delaware registry, matching my exact legal name and my social security number to the date of incorporation, the horrific reality would have hit him like a runaway freight train. He would have suddenly remembered my recorded phone call from the day before, where he proudly admitted that Diana set the company up without my knowledge to hide her assets from a family court judge. Cohen would have realized in a blinding flash of panic that he had officially filed a frivolous, aggressive civil lawsuit on behalf of a client who committed federal identity theft. By filing that subpoena, he had attached his own name and his own legal license to a multi-million-dollar fraud. He was now an accessory after the fact. I packed up my briefcase right at 5 o'clock. I walked out through the glass doors of my firm, took the elevator down to the massive marble lobby, and stepped out onto the busy Chicago sidewalk. I had barely made it half a block toward my parking garage when a man stepped directly into my path, physically blocking the sidewalk. It was David Cohen. I recognized him immediately from his firm's website, but he looked absolutely nothing like his polished corporate headshot. His expensive tailored suit jacket was unbuttoned and deeply wrinkled. His silk tie was violently loosened around his collar, and a fine sheen of nervous sweat coated his forehead despite the freezing wind coming off the lake. He looked frantically around at the passing pedestrians, clutching a heavy leather briefcase tightly to his chest like a shield. "Madison, please, I need exactly 2 minutes of your time," he said, his voice completely stripped of the arrogant, condescending tone he had used on the phone just yesterday. I stopped walking and stared at him. I did not step back or show any surprise. I simply let the silence stretch, making him sweat even more. "You have exactly 1 minute, Mr. Cohen," I replied coldly. "And I should remind you that approaching opposing counsel's client in public without representation is a massive ethical violation. My attorney would love to hear about this little ambush." Cohen actually flinched at the threat. "I know you retained aggressive corporate counsel," he stammered, wiping his sweaty forehead with the back of his trembling hand. "Listen to me very carefully, Madison. I did not know. I swear to you on my license, Diana lied to my face. She told me she had full signatory authority and that you were just a disgruntled nominal member trying to extort her. I had no idea she used your personal identity without your consent. I ran the Delaware filings this afternoon after the bank blocked my retainer. If your legal team takes this to the federal prosecutor, I will be disbarred. I could face actual prison time for filing that subpoena on her behalf." I stared at him, feeling absolutely zero pity for the man who had threatened to ruin my life just 24 hours ago. "Ignorance is not a valid legal defense when you are charging $1,000 an hour, David," I said smoothly. "You should have done your fundamental due diligence before you tried to bully an auditor." He took a desperate step closer, lowering his voice to a frantic whisper. "We can fix this right now without the federal authorities getting involved." He pleaded, completely abandoning his client to save his own skin. "We can make a quiet backdoor deal. I will personally convince Diana to drop the civil lawsuit immediately. I will withdraw as her legal counsel and bury all the paperwork. In exchange, you release just 30% of the Cypress Holdings funds to her account. That is more than enough for me to get my legal fees paid, and you get to keep over $3 million completely tax-free. Everyone walks away happy, nobody gets disbarred, and nobody goes to federal prison." I looked at the sweating, pathetic lawyer standing in front of me. He was willing to sell out his own client and facilitate a massive financial payoff just to wash his hands of the crime. I looked him dead in the eyes, and I actually laughed out loud. It was a sharp, genuine laugh of pure amusement that echoed over the noise of the city traffic. "You really think I care about keeping the money?" I asked, shaking my head in disbelief. "I do not want 30% of that stolen cash. I do not want 70% of it. I want absolute destruction." I unlatched my leather briefcase right there on the sidewalk. I pulled out a thick, heavy envelope printed on my attorney's official legal letterhead. I shoved the envelope hard against Cohen's chest, forcing him to fumble with his own briefcase to catch it before it hit the pavement. "That is a formal notice of an emergency family meeting," I told him, my voice dropping to a freezing, absolute register. "Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock sharp at my mother's new estate. You are going to be there and you are going to bring Diana. Tell my mother to have her bags packed." Friday morning arrived with a cold, overcast sky that perfectly matched the impending destruction. I drove my car up the winding, meticulously landscaped driveway of the North Shore estate Catherine and my mother had recently purchased. The property was massive, a sprawling modern farmhouse design with enormous floor-to-ceiling glass windows and a pristine white stone facade. It sat on several acres of manicured lawn, surrounded by towering oak trees that shielded it from the main road. It was the physical embodiment of stolen wealth, a monument to arrogance, built entirely on a foundation of federal fraud. I parked my car in the wide circular driveway right behind my brother's leased luxury sedan and took a deep, steadying breath. I grabbed my heavy leather briefcase from the passenger seat, stepped out into the crisp morning air, and walked up the sweeping stone steps to the double oak front doors. I did not knock. I simply turned the heavy brass handle and let myself in. The interior of the house was even more ostentatious than the exterior. The foyer featured cathedral ceilings, a massive cascading crystal chandelier, and walls lined with expensive, meaningless modern art. I walked across the imported marble floor, my heels clicking sharply against the stone signaling my arrival. I followed the low murmur of voices echoing from the back of the house and stepped into the formal living room. The entire cast of characters was already assembled waiting for me like a pack of impatient vultures circling a wounded animal. My mother Diana was sitting exactly in the center of a plush white velvet sofa. She was dressed impeccably in a silk blouse and tailored designer slacks, holding a delicate porcelain teacup. She looked the picture of serene, aristocratic confidence. Next to her sat Catherine wearing a rigid and expensive business suit. Catherine looked slightly less confident than my mother. Her eyes darted toward me with a flicker of the nervous energy she had shown in the hotel hallway, but she masked it quickly behind a cold, practiced sneer. Across from them, sitting stiffly in a leather accent chair, was my brother Bradley. He looked absolutely awful. The dark circles under his eyes were prominent, and a fine sheen of sweat coated his forehead, despite the cool climate-controlled temperature of the room. He was desperately trying to project an air of superiority, but his right leg was bouncing with frantic, uncontrollable nervous energy. Next to him sat Simone. True to her word, she was there. She wore a simple dark turtleneck sweater, her posture perfectly straight, and her face an unreadable mask of corporate stoicism. She made brief eye contact with me as I entered the room. A microscopic nod of her head confirmed she had done exactly what I asked. The digital files from Bradley's home office were currently secured on a flash drive in my lawyer's possession. Standing near the massive stone fireplace was David Cohen. He looked even worse than he had on the sidewalk yesterday afternoon. He was clutching his own briefcase with white knuckles, deliberately avoiding eye contact with both me and my mother. He was clearly praying that I had brought the signed quitclaim deed so he could quickly facilitate the transfer, collect his massive legal fee, and run away from the federal crime he had unknowingly attached his professional license to. "Ah," Madison Diana said, placing her teacup on the glass coffee table with a soft, dismissive clink. "So glad you decided to finally be an adult and join us. I trust your little temper tantrum is over now." I walked into the center of the room, but I did not sit down. I preferred to stand looking down at all of them from a position of absolute authority. I placed my heavy leather briefcase flat on the center of the massive glass coffee table. Diana crossed her legs and offered me a condescending, victorious smile. She truly believed the emergency family meeting I had called was my formal surrender. "I knew you would eventually see reason," she continued, her voice dripping with fake maternal affection. "When David filed that lawsuit yesterday, I told him you were just being stubborn. You are a smart girl, Madison. You know you cannot win a legal battle against us. You know you cannot hold family assets hostage. So let us just get this over with. Sign the deed, transfer Cypress Holdings back to me, and perhaps I will ask David to withdraw the embezzlement charges. I might even let you stay for breakfast. Just sign the paper, Madison." Bradley snapped, his voice cracking slightly with desperate impatience. "Stop trying to ruin everyone's life and just give Mom her money back so we can all move on. I have a very important meeting this afternoon, and I need my corporate cards unlocked immediately." Catherine leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, her eyes narrowing. "You made a complete fool of yourself at the gala," she said coldly. "But if you sign that document right now, I will refrain from calling your boss this morning. This is your absolute last chance to walk away with your career intact." I looked at each of them in turn. I looked at Bradley, drowning in secret debt, moments away from total bankruptcy. I looked at Catherine, arrogantly defending a woman who had used her as a human shield for a fraudulent $2 million mortgage. I looked at Cohen, sweating through his expensive suit, fully aware of the legal guillotine hanging over his neck. And finally, I looked at Diana, the architect of this entire toxic disaster, sitting there demanding the keys to a kingdom she had built on my stolen identity. I did not say a single word. I reached down and unlatched the brass clasps of my briefcase. The sharp clicks echoed loudly in the quiet, cavernous room. Everyone leaned in slightly, their eyes glued to my hands. They were expecting to see the crumpled quitclaim deed Bradley had thrown at me 2 days ago. They were expecting the white flag of surrender. They were expecting the magical piece of paper that would instantly solve all of their financial problems and restore their luxurious illusions. I opened the lid of the briefcase. I bypassed the empty side pocket where a quitclaim deed would normally be kept. Instead, I reached into the main compartment and pulled out a thick, heavy stack of official documents. They were not drafted by David Cohen. They were not printed on standard legal paper. I dropped the heavy stack directly onto the glass coffee table with a loud, authoritative smack that made both Diana and Catherine jump in their seats. The documents were beautifully stamped with the official unmistakable seals of the United States Internal Revenue Service and the State of Delaware Department of Corporations. The heavy thud of the documents hitting the glass coffee table echoed through the cavernous living room like a gunshot. The smug, victorious smile that had been resting on my mother's face completely vanished. Catherine visibly flinched, leaning back into the plush velvet cushions, as if the paper itself might burn her. David Cohen, who had been hovering nervously near the massive stone fireplace, took 2 cautious steps forward. His eyes locked instantly onto the official government seals. He knew immediately that those were not standard civil transfer forms. He knew what a death warrant looked like. "What is this, Madison?" Diana demanded, her voice losing its smooth, aristocratic polish and pitching up into a sharp, nervous register. "I told David to send you a quitclaim deed. Why are you bringing IRS tax paperwork into my home?" I kept my hands resting lightly on top of the stack of papers. "Because you did not just hide a few savings bonds from my father during your divorce, Diana," I explained, my voice echoing with absolute authority in the quiet room. "You stole my social security number and my legal identity to create a corporate shell company in Delaware. You parked $4.5 million in an entity that legally belongs entirely to me. To the federal government, to the state registry, and to the Internal Revenue Service, you have absolutely zero connection to Cypress Holdings." David Cohen wiped a thick layer of sweat from his forehead. He knew exactly where this entire conversation was going. He looked at Diana with a mixture of pure terror and deep resentment, realizing she had lied to him about her legal standing. "That is my money," Diana shrieked, finally dropping the sophisticated socialite facade she had spent years perfecting. "I earned it. I protected it from your father. You are just a name on a piece of paper." "A name on a piece of paper is the only thing that matters in federal corporate law," I fired back, my tone turning to absolute ice. "When you decided to use my identity to bypass the family court judge, you made a catastrophic miscalculation. You gave me absolute uncontested legal authority over every single asset within that portfolio. You thought I was too young and too stupid to ever find out. You thought you could just bully me into signing it all back over to you when the statute of limitations on your divorce settlement expired. But you forgot what I do for a living. I am an auditor. I hunt down financial criminals for a living." I reached down and slid the top document off the stack. I pushed it across the smooth glass table until it rested directly in front of David Cohen. I did not need to explain the legal jargon to him. I wanted him to read it aloud so everyone else in the room could hear it from their own expensive attorney. "What is that, David?" Catherine asked, her voice trembling as she looked at the terrified lawyer. "Tell me what she just put on the table." Cohen picked up the document with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the bold black text at the top of the page. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously against his tight collar. "It is not the quitclaim deed," he whispered, his voice completely devoid of any legal arrogance. "It is a formal liquidation order." Bradley shot up from his leather chair. "What does that mean?" he yelled, looking frantically from Cohen to me. "What the hell is a liquidation order?" "It means I did not surrender the company," I said smoothly, turning my gaze to my frantic brother. "It means I exercised my rights as the sole managing member of Cypress Holdings. Yesterday afternoon, immediately after I froze your corporate credit cards and locked you out of the commercial bank accounts, I authorized my legal team to execute a complete liquidation of the entire asset portfolio. Every single stock, every mutual fund, every municipal bond, and every high-yield savings account tied to that LLC has been entirely cashed out. The room descended into a stunning, suffocating silence. The reality of my words crashed over them like a tidal wave. They had spent the last 9 years living off the massive interest and the unlimited borrowing power of that hidden portfolio. It was the financial anchor for their entire fake empire. And with a single signature on a legal document, I had completely wiped it off the board. I legally dissolved the investment portfolio. I continued ensuring they heard every single devastating detail of their ruin. The $4.5 million is no longer tied up in corporate holding structures or accessible equity lines. It has been converted into pure liquid cash and transferred into a secure private trust account that only I have the legal authority to access. Cypress Holdings is essentially an empty shell. The money is gone. Bradley's face turned a violent shade of crimson. The veins in his thick neck bulged against his collar. He took a threatening step toward me, his hands balled into tight fists. He looked exactly like he wanted to physically tear me apart. "You stole it!" Bradley screamed, his voice breaking with absolute hysteria. "You stole our money! That was my expansion capital. That was the down payment for my new house. You cannot just take $4.5 million from your own family. I will call the police right now. I will have you arrested for grand larceny. You are a thief." I did not flinch or take a single step back. I looked at the pathetic, desperate man who had spent his entire life treating me like garbage while secretly drowning in his own incompetence. "You cannot steal what is legally 100% yours," I replied coldly, my voice cutting through his hysterical screaming like a freshly sharpened knife. "But let us talk about where that money is going." I turned away from my screaming brother and shifted my entire focus to the woman sitting frozen next to my mother. Catherine had not moved a single muscle since I dropped the federal documents onto the glass table. She was staring at the official seals with a look of absolute, unadulterated horror. I walked slowly around the edge of the coffee table, stepping directly onto the expensive imported Persian rug that anchored the center of the room. I looked up at the towering cathedral ceilings, the sparkling crystal chandelier, and the massive floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the manicured private acreage. It truly was a spectacular piece of real estate. "Catherine, you bragged to me in the hallway at the charity gala about this beautiful new estate," I said, keeping my voice calm and conversational, which only made the underlying threat that much more terrifying. "You told me you and Diana bought it together to build your peaceful new life. You told me you had architectural plans and wealth I could only dream of. You are a highly successful woman. You have excellent personal credit, a prominent social standing, and a seat on the board of directors for 3 major hospitals. You are smart enough to know that securing a $2 million mortgage for a luxury property requires significant liquid capital and absolute financial transparency." Catherine swallowed hard, her throat clicking audibly in the silent room. She could not pull her eyes away from my face. She knew exactly what I was about to say, but her brain was desperately trying to reject the incoming trauma. When it came time to sign the closing documents for this house, Diana played her role perfectly. I continued pacing slowly in front of the white velvet sofa. "She told you she was a woman of independent wealth. She told you she had a massive retirement fund, safely tucked away in a corporate holding company. She offered to use her company to guarantee the mortgage. It sounded so sophisticated and convenient. Why tie up your personal liquid cash when Diana could just pledge her massive corporate portfolio as collateral? You trusted the woman you married. You sat at the closing table, you smiled at the real estate agent, and you eagerly co-signed the primary loan agreement while Diana submitted the corporate guarantee on behalf of Cypress Holdings." Diana finally found her voice. "Shut up!" she hissed, her face contorting with panic as she reached out to grab Catherine's arm. "Catherine, do not listen to her. She is just trying to manipulate you." Catherine violently yanked her arm away from my mother, her eyes remaining locked entirely on me. Continue, Catherine whispered, her voice shaking with pure dread. What Diana conveniently failed to mention at that closing table was that she did not own the corporate guarantor, I explained, delivering the lethal blow with surgical precision. I did. Cyprus Holdings was listed as the primary collateral for the massive bridge loan you used to buy this exact house. The roof currently over our heads, the marble floor beneath our feet, and the manicured lawn outside those windows were all secured entirely by my stolen identity. I stopped pacing and stood directly in front of Catherine. In the world of high finance, when a corporate guarantor is legally dissolved and its assets are completely liquidated, the collateral supporting the loan simply evaporates into thin air. The commercial bank does not politely ask you to find a new cosigner. They execute what is called an acceleration clause. It is a standard non-negotiable provision embedded in every single high-risk commercial mortgage. When the collateral disappears, the entire remaining balance of the loan becomes due immediately. Catherine pressed her hands against her chest, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. Yesterday afternoon, when I liquidated the Cyprus Holdings portfolio and moved the $4.5 million into my private trust, the automated banking system registered the massive withdrawal, I said, watching the reality crush her. The commercial lender holding the mortgage on this estate received an immediate red flag alert that their primary collateral no longer existed. They ran a secondary emergency audit and discovered that the corporate guarantor had just been permanently dissolved by its rightful legal owner. Bradley stopped his hysterical pacing and stared at me, his jaw completely unhinged. Even he understood the catastrophic real estate nightmare I was describing. "You do not have 30 years to pay off this beautiful house, Catherine," I stated coldly. "You do not even have 30 days. The bank is executing the acceleration clause as we speak. They are calling in the entire $2 million loan immediately. And since Cyprus Holdings is completely empty and Diana has absolutely zero personal assets to her name, the entire financial burden falls exclusively on the primary cosigner. That is you." I let the silence hang for a moment, ensuring she absorbed every single ounce of the devastation. "You are personally on the hook for $2 million in liquid cash. And because the loan was secured using a fraudulently pledged corporate entity, the bank is not going to negotiate a payment plan. They are going to foreclose immediately to mitigate their exposure to a federal crime. I did not just take back my company. I literally just pulled this house right out from under you. The bank is coming to take the keys, and they are going to obliterate your pristine credit score in the process." Catherine sat frozen on the white velvet sofa. The arrogant, powerful socialite who had threatened to destroy my career just 2 nights ago was completely gone. In her place was a woman who had just realized she was financially ruined. She slowly turned her head to look at my mother. The color had completely drained from Catherine's face, leaving her skin a sickly ashen gray. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of profound shock and a rapidly boiling volcanic rage. She finally understood that Diana had not just lied to her. Diana had used her as a human shield to co-sign a fraudulent mortgage. The silence in the room was abruptly shattered by a sharp, violent crack that echoed off the high cathedral ceilings. Catherine swung her arm back and slapped Diana directly across the face with everything she had. The sheer force of the blow snapped my mother's head to the side, sending her delicate porcelain teacup crashing to the marble floor where it shattered into dozens of jagged pieces. A bright, angry red handprint instantly bloomed across Diana's pale cheek. She stumbled backward against the white velvet sofa, her eyes wide with absolute, uncomprehending shock. She raised a trembling hand to her face, unable to process that the wealthy, cultured woman she had manipulated into marriage had just physically struck her. "You lied to me!" Catherine shrieked, her voice tearing through the elegant room, completely stripped of its usual refined socialite polish. "You used my name. You used my pristine credit. You chained my financial future to a sinking ship, just to secure a mansion you could never afford on your own." "Catherine, please, you have to listen to me," Diana stammered. stepping forward with her hands raised in a desperate pleading gesture. "We can fix this. David is a brilliant lawyer. He can fight the acceleration clause in court. We can file an injunction against Madison." But Catherine was already backing away, practically running toward the far corner of the massive living room. She plunged her hand into her tailored blazer pocket and pulled out her expensive smartphone. "I am calling my attorneys right now." Catherine spat, her hands shaking so violently she could barely unlock the screen. "I am filing for divorce this afternoon. I will go straight to the commercial lender and tell them everything. I will testify under oath that you deliberately committed financial fraud to secure this property. You are going to rot in a federal prison, and I am going to make sure my legal team takes whatever pitiful scraps you have left." David Cohen watched the complete implosion of his client with wide, terrified eyes. He did not say a single word in Diana's defense. He did not offer any brilliant legal strategies. He simply gripped the handle of his briefcase, took a slow step backward, and then another. While Catherine was screaming into her phone to her divorce lawyers, Cohen quietly slipped out of the living room, hurried across the marble foyer, and walked out the heavy oak front doors. He was abandoning ship to save his own license. The absolute chaos of Catherine's meltdown seemed to finally snap the last remaining thread of Bradley's sanity. He looked around the room, watching the walls of their fake empire literally cave in. He realized with terrifying clarity that Diana had no money left to bail him out. He turned his frantic, bloodshot eyes to his wife. Simone had remained seated in her chair the entire time, perfectly still, watching the destruction with an aura of cold, calculated detachment. "Simone," Bradley said, his voice dropping into a pathetic, pleading whine as he lunged forward to grab her hands. "Simone, you have to help me. You have to fix this." Simone did not pull her hands away. She simply looked down at his sweaty, trembling fingers gripping her own. "You have to pull your 401k, Bradley begged, his panic escalating into a rapid, breathless ramble. "You are an executive director. You have stock options. You have a massive corporate salary and perfect credit. If we just take out a personal loan against your income, I can cover the immediate margin calls. I can save the firm. It is just a temporary cash flow issue, Simone. You are my wife. You promised to stand by me for better or for worse. We are a team, and I need you to pull your weight right now." Simone looked up from his hands and stared directly into his panicked eyes. "You want me to drain my retirement and leverage my career to bail out a fake venture capital firm?" she asked, her voice perfectly soft and deadly calm. "It is not fake," Bradley yelled, slamming his fist against his leg. "It is a legitimate business. You are just listening to her lies." He pointed an accusatory finger at me. "She is trying to turn you against me." Simone stood up. She smoothed the front of her dark turtleneck sweater, radiating absolute corporate authority. She reached down to her left hand and slowly, deliberately twisted the massive diamond engagement ring and the platinum wedding band off her finger. She held them for a fraction of a second before tossing them onto the glass coffee table right next to my official IRS documents. The heavy jewelry landed with a sharp final clink. "We are not a team, Bradley," Simone said, her voice echoing with chilling precision. "A team does not secretly drain their joint life savings. A team does not forge his pregnant wife's signature on a secondary mortgage to pay off his toxic corporate debt." Bradley froze completely. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a walking corpse. "How do you know about that?" he whispered, the absolute terror in his voice confirming his guilt louder than a confession. Simone reached into her designer handbag. She pulled out a thick manila envelope and dropped it right next to the discarded rings. "Those are divorce papers," she stated flatly. "I signed them this morning. I am filing for sole custody of our unborn child." Then she reached back into her bag and pulled out a small silver flash drive. She held it up between her thumb and index finger so the morning light caught the metal. "And this is a complete digital backup of your home office computer. It contains every single fraudulent wire transfer you made over the last 6 months, every doctored bank statement you submitted to your investors, and the original forged PDF file of the home equity loan." "You stole that from my private office?" Bradley gasped, stumbling backward, as if the tiny piece of plastic was a loaded gun pointed directly at his chest. I secured it, Simone corrected him coldly. And I already handed a duplicate copy to Madison's federal litigator. I will be testifying against you to the federal authorities to guarantee my own immunity. I will not let you drag my baby into a federal prison cell. Do not ever contact me again. Simone turned on her heel and walked out of the room with her head held high. She did not look back. The heavy front door opened and slammed shut behind her, the sound vibrating through the silent, broken house. Bradley collapsed back into his leather chair, burying his face in his trembling hands, weeping uncontrollably as his entire life vanished. I stood in the center of the room, completely untouched by the wreckage, watching the empire burn to ash. Diana was left standing alone. The elegant, untouchable socialite was entirely gone. Her expensive hair was disheveled from the slap. Her cheek was violently bruised and swelling. Her wealthy wife was pacing in the corner, actively turning state's evidence against her to the divorce lawyers. Her golden child was sobbing in a chair moments away from federal indictment. Her stolen $4.5 million fortune was permanently locked in my private trust. And the $2 million mansion she was currently standing inside was being seized by the commercial bank. She had absolutely nothing left to her name. Diana looked around the room, her eyes darting frantically as her brain tried to process the absolute totality of her destruction. Then her gaze snapped directly to me. The panic and the fear in her eyes vanished instantly, replaced by a dark, feral, uncontrollable rage. She let out a guttural, terrifying scream that tore from the bottom of her throat, completely backing into a corner with her entire life destroyed. Diana lunged across the glass coffee table, her hands extended like jagged claws aiming directly for my throat. I did not flinch. I did not raise my hands to block her attack, and I certainly did not scream. I simply pivoted on my heel and took one smooth, highly calculated step to the right. Diana had thrown her entire body weight into the lunge, her blind rage completely compromising her balance. When I stepped aside, there was absolutely nothing left to stop her momentum. Her knees slammed violently into the thick, solid edge of the glass coffee table. The brutal impact sent her pitching forward, her arms flailing wildly as she crashed over the center of the table and collapsed heavily onto the hard marble floor. She hit the ground with a sickening thud, knocking the wind completely out of her lungs. She lay there on the cold stone, gasping desperately for air, like a fish thrown onto a dock. Her expensive silk blouse was twisted and stained with sweat. Her perfectly styled hair was a disheveled mess. It was the physical manifestation of her entirely broken life. Bradley remained frozen in his leather chair, too paralyzed by his own impending doom to even reach out and help his mother. Catherine just watched from the corner of the room, her face a mask of absolute, unadulterated disgust. I looked down at the pathetic woman struggling to breathe on the floor. "You actually thought I came here alone?" I asked, my voice echoing clearly in the massive room. "You thought I would walk into a hostile environment with the exact documents that prove your federal crimes without taking the necessary precautions? I did not come here to fight with you, Diana. I came here to keep you occupied." Right on cue, the heavy oak front doors of the mansion swung open. It was not Simone returning. It was two tall men dressed in sharp, understated gray suits. They did not knock and they did not wait to be invited inside. They had already been authorized to enter the premises. They walked with the heavy, undeniable authority of federal law enforcement. They stepped into the grand foyer and approached the living room, their sharp eyes scanning the chaotic scene before locking directly onto me. "Ms. Madison," the lead detective asked, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that commanded instant respect. I nodded and stepped forward to meet them, leaving my mother groveling on the floor. "Detectives," I replied smoothly. "Thank you for arriving so promptly." I reached back to my leather briefcase, which was still resting safely on the undamaged side of the glass coffee table. I pulled out a second identical stack of forensic files I had meticulously prepared the night before. I handed the thick, heavy dossier directly to the lead detective. "Everything we discussed on the phone is completely documented right there," I explained in my most professional, clinical auditing voice. You will find 9 years of forged corporate filings, the original date of incorporation, using my stolen social security number, and the complete paper trail of the $4.5 million she actively hid from the Internal Revenue Service and the family court system. The detective opened the folder and briefly scanned the top summary page, nodding his head in silent approval at my thorough forensic work. A financial crime of this magnitude, specifically felony identity theft, combined with massive tax evasion exceeding $1 million, automatically triggers a mandatory federal investigation. I continued making sure my mother heard every single word as she finally managed to push herself up onto her hands and knees. This is no longer a civil family dispute. It is a Class C federal felony carrying a maximum sentence of up to 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Before Diana could even form a coherent sentence to defend herself, Catherine stepped out from the shadows of the corner. "I will testify," Catherine announced loudly, her voice trembling but absolutely resolute. "I will give you complete access to all of our joint financial records." She lied to me. She forged documents to secure the mortgage on this house using stolen corporate collateral. I want full immunity, and I am willing to cooperate entirely with your investigation. The second detective nodded at Catherine, pulling a small notepad from his inside jacket pocket. "We will need to take your official written statement down at the field office, ma'am," he said politely before turning his attention entirely to my mother. Diana was still kneeling on the marble floor, staring up at the two federal agents with a look of mind-shattering disbelief. The grand illusion of her wealth and power was officially dead. She was no longer a wealthy, untouchable socialite. She was a criminal suspect, sitting in the ruins of a house she no longer owned. The lead detective stepped around the coffee table and looked down at her. "Diana," he said firmly, deliberately, leaving out any respectful titles. "Stand up and place your hands behind your back." Diana shook her head frantically, crawling backward away from the detective until her back hit the base of the white velvet sofa. "No," she gasped, tears of genuine terror streaming down her bruised face. "No, this is a massive mistake. I have a lawyer. You cannot do this to me. David, David, do something. Tell them. Explain the constructive trust to them. David, help me." She screamed for the man she had paid thousands of dollars to protect her. She screamed for the arrogant attorney who had threatened to ruin my life and drag me through the mud just yesterday afternoon. But her screams only echoed off the high cathedral ceilings, answered by nothing but absolute silence. The detective reached down, grabbed her firmly by the arm, and hauled her forcefully to her feet. As he pulled a heavy pair of steel handcuffs from his utility belt, I looked my mother directly in her terrified eyes. "David cannot help you, Diana," I said softly, delivering the final crushing blow. Because the moment Catherine mentioned calling her own lawyers 10 minutes ago, David quietly slipped out the back door to save his own license. "You are completely on your own." The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked loudly around her wrists, locking her securely in place. The sound was incredibly satisfying. The detective spun her around to face the wall, pressing his hand against her shoulder as he began reciting the words that would officially end her life as she knew it. "You have the right to remain silent," he stated clearly. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Those words, delivered in the cold, clinical voice of the federal detective, were the last things my mother heard before being escorted out of the $2 million mansion she had fraudulently acquired. The heavy steel handcuffs clicked securely around her wrists, anchoring her to the reality she spent a decade trying to outrun. I watched the heavy oak front doors close behind her, sealing the tomb on her elaborate empire of lies. The silence that followed was the sound of absolute freedom. That was exactly 6 months ago. Today, the only sound in my life is the soft, rhythmic hum of city traffic drifting up to my luxury high-rise apartment. I am sitting quietly at my kitchen island, the bright morning sun pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows, warming the sleek granite countertops. I wrap my hands around a ceramic mug of freshly brewed dark roast coffee. It is quiet. It is completely, perfectly peaceful. The fallout from that Friday morning was absolute and merciless. Catherine made good on her promise before the weekend was over. She hired the most ruthless divorce attorneys in Chicago and severed herself from Diana. Because my mother had committed federal fraud and used Catherine as an unwitting human shield to secure a commercial mortgage, their prenuptial agreement was entirely invalidated. The marriage was annulled with extreme prejudice. Catherine walked away with her prominent social reputation bruised, but her personal wealth entirely intact. She left Diana with absolutely nothing. My mother is currently sitting in a federal holding facility, wearing a standard issue uniform, awaiting sentencing for felony identity theft and massive tax evasion. The judge denied her bail because she is considered a significant flight risk with zero remaining assets. David Cohen, terrified of losing his lucrative law license, struck a rapid immunity deal with the prosecutors and handed over every piece of incriminating communication he had with my mother. She is facing a minimum of 10 years in a federal penitentiary. Bradley did not fare any better. The moment Cypress Holdings was formally liquidated and his corporate credit cards were permanently deactivated, his entire fake venture capital firm collapsed overnight. Without the stolen funds to cover his toxic margin calls, his aggressive private creditors descended on him like a pack of starving wolves. They dragged him into involuntary bankruptcy court and successfully pierced his corporate veil. Every single asset he owned was seized and liquidated by the court. Today, the man who used to scream at me in expensive tailored suits is living in a rundown motel by the interstate. He is working a minimum wage retail job, selling athletic shoes at a dying suburban mall just to pay his court-ordered restitution. His wages are garnished directly from his paycheck. Simone finalized their divorce 2 months ago. Because she filed proactively, she was granted sole legal and physical custody of their unborn child, completely insulating the baby from Bradley's catastrophic financial ruin. With the encrypted flash drive of evidence she provided to my lawyer, the federal authorities granted her total immunity. She kept her high-paying corporate job, her perfect credit score, and her dignity. She completely erased Bradley from her future. That left the complicated question of what to do with the massive $4.5 million fortune I had legally liquidated from Cypress Holdings. I never viewed that money as a winning lottery ticket. I viewed it as a highly radioactive asset that needed to be systematically neutralized. My first call was directly to the Internal Revenue Service. Because the company was legally registered under my Social Security number, I was technically liable for the taxes my mother had actively evaded for 9 years. I worked hand in hand with federal government auditors to calculate the exact amount of back taxes, severe penalties, and compounding interest owed on the portfolio. I wrote a certified check to the United States Treasury for exactly $2 million. It was a staggering sum of money, but paying it instantly wiped my record completely clean. I was officially absolved of any and all financial liability. The federal government got their money, and my mother permanently lost her only remaining leverage against me. That left exactly $2.5 million of clean, legally acquired liquid cash in my private trust. I did not buy a flashy sports car, and I did not buy a massive estate in the North Shore. Instead, I used a portion of the funds to buy a senior partnership stake in the financial forensics firm where I work. I went from being their top senior auditor to sitting directly on the board of directors. The rest of the money, almost $2 million, was locked into a heavily restricted ironclad trust fund. I did not make myself the beneficiary of that wealth. I made Simone's unborn baby the sole beneficiary. I appointed a neutral third-party fiduciary to manage the account, ensuring that the funds will strictly cover the child's premium healthcare, private education, and future housing. The trust is legally structured with absolute precision so that Bradley cannot access a single penny of it. He will spend the rest of his pathetic life working retail, knowing his child is a multimillionaire thanks solely to the sister he relentlessly tried to destroy. I take a slow, deep sip of my coffee. It is rich, dark, and perfectly hot. Unlike the day I received that threatening package from David Cohen, there are no frantic knocks at my front door. There are no screaming relatives demanding I sacrifice my stability to fund their delusions. I am surrounded entirely by the beautiful independent life I built with my own hands and protected with my own intelligence. Suddenly, the smartphone resting on my kitchen island vibrates against the granite. The screen lights up, displaying an incoming call. The caller ID does not show a saved name. It simply reads, Cook County Correctional Facility. It is a collect call from an inmate. It is my mother calling from a jail payphone, likely desperate to beg for commissary money or a high-priced defense attorney she still believes I owe her. I stare at the glowing screen for 3 seconds. I do not feel anger. I do not feel sadness. I simply feel nothing at all. I reach out, press the red button to reject the call, and tap the screen one more time to permanently block the number forever. I set the phone face down on the counter, pick up my warm coffee mug, and look out over the glittering Chicago skyline. The ultimate sweet revenge is simply living a successful life where they no longer exist.